Your energy isn't just a resource. It's the engine behind every meaningful action you take. It fuels your ability to create, connect, serve, and lead. But too often, people go through life expending that energy without knowing what they're fueling. They give their time, emotions, and focus away reactively, without asking a single important question. Why? When you lose your why, your energy becomes scattered, vulnerable to whatever, or whoever, demands it next. Understanding what your energy fuels begins with clarity. What matters most to you? What are you building? Is it a strong family, a purposeful career, a healthier life, or deeper spiritual grounding? When you're clear about the answer, your energy becomes a tool of precision, not exhaustion. You begin to recognize that not every request deserves your attention, and not every conversation is worth the emotional cost it demands. There's something transformative about aligning your energy with purpose. Suddenly, distractions become obvious, and so do energy themes. Those people, situations, or habits that siphon your strength under the disguise of urgency or obligation. Without purpose, it's easy to confuse noise for necessity. But when you know your why, you can discern what belongs and what doesn't in your physical, emotional, and relational space. Many people allow others to dictate where their energy goes. They hand over emotional bandwidth to gossip, arguments, negativity, or people who refuse to grow. But if your energy is meant to build something important, you must become fiercely intentional. It's not selfish, it's stewardship. You're not shutting people out. You're showing up better for the people who matter by not being drained by those who don't. Your energy, directed with purpose, creates compound impact. Think about a focused beam of light versus a scattered one. One illuminates a room. The other fades into the background. When you define what your energy is meant to serve, you also define the values by which you live. That clarity becomes your compass, guiding where you show up, how you respond, and what you let go of without guilt. Start asking better questions before you give away your energy. Is this helping me serve my purpose? Does this conversation build, drain, or confuse me? Does this interaction align with my growth or distract me from it? People who protect their energy aren't cold, they're clear. And clarity leads to influence. You start living not out of reaction, but intention. It also transforms your relationships. When people know what you stand for, when they see that your energy is not up for negotiation, they either rise to meet your standard or quietly leave your life. This kind of quiet strength is magnetic. It draws in those who are aligned and repels those who are not, without needing to argue, chase, or explain. Ultimately, knowing what your energy fuels makes it easier to say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. It grounds your presence and sharpens your discernment. It invites others to honor your boundaries because they see that you live by them. Consistently negative energy, like a virus, spreads with alarming speed, doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't need logic to justify itself. One bitter comment, one cynical remark, one angry outburst can shift the emotional temperature of an entire room. Human beings are deeply wired for emotional contagion, meaning we tend to absorb the moods and attitudes of those around us, often without realizing it. Negativity, due to its intensity and emotional charge, tends to stick faster and cut deeper than its positive counterpart. In workplaces, families, and communities, a single toxic attitude can erode trust, motivation, and collaboration. It's often subtle at first, a complaint here, a sarcastic jab there. But over time, that behavior becomes normalized. What once felt uncomfortable now feels expected. The team doesn't just perform worse. They relate to each other with less compassion, less curiosity, and more guardedness. Negativity doesn't just influence mood. It reprograms culture. This dynamic is even more dangerous when it's left unspoken. Wounds often becomes complicity. When no one confronts the source of negative energy, it grows roots. It becomes the atmosphere. The problem is, people begin adjusting to that toxic atmosphere instead of addressing it. They build emotional armor rather than vulnerability. And when positivity is reintroduced, it feels naive, even threatening, because it disrupts the new, bitter equilibrium. On a biological level, negative emotions like anger, fear, and resentment trigger a faster and stronger response in the brain than positive ones like gratitude or joy. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. Danger had to be noticed quickly. But socially, it means negativity dominates our perception unless we are intentional about what we absorb and reflect. That's why unchecked pessimism can shape not just how we feel, but how we see the world. In relationships, negativity can show up as chronic criticism, emotional withholding, passive aggression, or defensiveness. These aren't just annoying traits, they're corrosive forces. They chip away at trust and emotional safety. What's worse is that negative energy is often framed as a just being honest or a keeping it real, when in truth, it's unresolved emotion being dumped on others as a substitute for accountability and self-awareness. To combat this, positivity must be more than just optimistic thinking. It must be grounded in values, clarity, and courageous communication. It has to be modeled, not preached. People need to see what it looks like to hold firm boundaries without hostility, to offer feedback without shaming, and to face conflict without becoming corrosive. Positivity doesn't mean ignoring hard truths. It means choosing to communicate them in ways that preserve dignity and connection. This is especially important in leadership. Leaders, whether in homes, teams, or communities, set the emotional tone. If they tolerate or participate in negativity, it becomes contagious. But when they interrupt it with presence, purpose, and emotional clarity, they begin to change the narrative. They prove that positivity isn't weakness, it's discipline. And that energy, positive or negative, is a choice we make with every word, every silence, and every reaction. The real danger of negative energy is not just in what it does to the moment, but in what it convinces us about the future. It paints possibility as naive, people as untrustworthy, and life as something to endure rather than shape. That's why managing our energy isn't just a personal habit, it's an ethical responsibility. We are not passive observers of emotional environments, we are contributors to them, whether consciously or unconsciously. Empathy without absorption is the subtle but powerful ability to feel with someone without drowning in their emotional state. It's the discipline of understanding another person's pain, frustration, or sorrow, while keeping a clear boundary between their experience and your own. Many people mistakenly believe that to be empathetic is to fully feel what the other feels. But when you do that without emotional boundaries, you risk carrying the weight of pain that isn't yours to resolve. This is where empathy turns into emotional absorption, and it becomes draining rather than connecting. The danger of emotional absorption is that it often masquerades as compassion. You want to help, so you over-identify. You take their mood as your own, their crisis as your responsibility, their disappointment as a reflection of your failure to support them. In this state, you lose clarity. You lose the ability to respond wisely because you've become entangled in emotions that don't belong entirely to you. And when that happens repeatedly, burnout is inevitable. To be empathetic without absorbing is to listen deeply but stay anchored. It means holding space for someone's pain without becoming emotionally hijacked. Think of it like being a lifeguard. You don't jump into the water and panic with the drowning person. You remain calm, steady, and skilled so that you can truly help. This emotional differentiation is not coldness, it's maturity. It allows you to show up again and again without losing yourself in the process. Boundaries are the structure that allow empathy to breathe. Without them, empathy becomes porous and destabilizing. With them, empathy becomes sustainable. The healthiest people are not those who feel everything, but those who know when to engage and when to step back. They are able to say, "I see your pain," without unconsciously adding, "and now I must carry it." That distinction preserves both dignity and emotional health. Empathy without absorption also fosters better problem solving. When you're emotionally enmeshed, you tend to react, not respond. You either rush to fix the problem, overextend yourself, or become overwhelmed. But when you stay grounded, you can offer perspective, patience, and clarity. Gifts that often do more than emotional mirroring ever could. People need to be seen, not saved. They need truth and presence more than they need pity. It's also a matter of respect. Absorbing another person's pain assumes they can't carry it themselves. It subtly disempowers. Empathy without absorption, on the other hand, affirms their capacity to struggle, to process, to grow. It supports without rescuing. It's the difference between joining someone in the trench and sitting beside the trench, reminding them they can climb out, while offering a hand when they ask for it. In relationships, this skill becomes even more critical. Whether with partners, Parents, friends, or colleagues, constant emotional absorption creates codependency. It breeds resentment, guilt, and exhaustion. But when each person is responsible for their own emotional regulation, empathy becomes a bridge, not a burden. It deepens connection rather than draining it, and it fosters a kind of emotional trust that is far more resilient than shared suffering alone. Ultimately, empathy without absorption requires practice. It requires knowing your limits, honoring your energy, and trusting that presence does not require personal sacrifice. You can be kind without collapsing. You can be compassionate without compromising your center. And in doing so, you become a far more stable and empowering force for the people who need you most. Setting boundaries, not walls, is one of the most essential skills for protecting your energy without disconnecting from the world. Boundaries are not meant to shut people out, but to preserve the conditions in which healthy relationships can exist. They define where you end and someone else begins, mentally, emotionally, physically. When boundaries are absent, others tend to occupy more space than they should, often unintentionally, leading to resentment, confusion, or exhaustion on your part. Walls, on the other hand, are built out of fear, not clarity. They are rigid and reactionary, meant to block, not to define. Not to define. When someone has been hurt repeatedly, it's tempting to retreat behind emotional walls, telling yourself it's safer that way. But walls don't just keep people out, they also keep you in. They isolate rather than protect. While boundaries invite healthy interaction, walls discourage all interaction. Walls discourage all interaction. One fosters growth. The other ensures stagnation. People often confuse the two because both involve saying a no. But boundaries say a no from a place of self-respect and openness. Walls say a no from self-protection and avoidance. A boundary might look like saying, "I'm not available to talk late at night," while a wall would be disappearing altogether. One sets a clear limit, the other cuts off the relationship altogether. Knowing the difference between the two is a form of emotional intelligence that few are ever taught directly. Boundaries require you to be present and responsible. They demand that you take ownership of your needs and communicate them clearly. This means you're not expecting others to read your mind or to manage your emotions for you. Instead, you're drawing lines that honor your time, your mental health, and your emotional bandwidth. It's not selfish, it's strategic. And it enables you to show up more authentically in every area of your life. When you set boundaries, you also teach people how to treat you. You demonstrate what you're willing to accept and what you're not. People may resist at first, especially if they've benefited from your lack of boundaries in the past, but consistency creates clarity. Over time, your relationships begin to reflect mutual respect rather than silent sacrifice. You stop overextending, over-explaining, and over-functioning in spaces that don't value your presence in a healthy way. Boundaries also create space for genuine connection. They allow you to engage without resentment. They help you listen without losing your own voice. Because you're not constantly trying to manage or fix others, you become more grounded, more honest, and more available. Ironically, by setting limits, you actually become more loving. You're no longer operating from burnout or obligation, but from integrity and choice. It's important to remember that boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about guiding your own behavior. You can't force someone to respect your limits, but you can control what you tolerate. You can choose what conversations you enter, what dynamics you allow, and when to walk away. That's where your power lies, not in trying to change people, but in being clear about what you'll allow in your space. Ultimately, the goal is not to disconnect from people, but to connect more wisely. Boundaries allow you to stay open without being overwhelmed, kind without being used, and involved without being consumed. They're the mark of someone who knows their worth and is no longer willing to compromise their peace in order to maintain appearances. "You can't pour from an empty cup" is more than a motivational slogan. It's a psychological, emotional, and physiological reality. The metaphor is simple but profound. If you continue to give without replenishing yourself, eventually there will be nothing left to give. This applies to your relationships, your career, your mental health, and even your spiritual life. People who consistently ignore their own needs in order to serve others often do so under the illusion that sacrifice equals strength. But in truth, it often leads to burnout, resentment, and quiet suffering. We live in a culture that glorifies overextension. The more you do, the less you sleep, the more you're admired. But pouring yourself out endlessly, with no system of renewal, doesn't make you noble, it makes you empty. People think they are being selfless, but what they're often doing is erasing themselves in the process. That's not love. That's martyrdom disguised as duty, and it's unsustainable. Replenishing your own cup begins with recognizing that your needs are not inconveniences. Rest is not laziness. Boundaries are not selfish. Solitude is not abandonment. Taking care of yourself, your emotional state, your physical health, your spiritual well-being is not a luxury. It's a necessity. The people who depend on you don't need a hollow shell, barely functioning. They need a present, grounded, healthy you. Self-care isn't always candles and spa days. Sometimes it's doing the hard thing, saying no to a draining request, admitting you're overwhelmed, or walking away from toxic dynamics. Sometimes it's choosing a full night's sleep over one more late-night email. Sometimes it's letting others take responsibility for themselves, instead of rushing in to fix what's not yours to fix. You refill your cup by acting with clarity, not guilt. There's also a deeper philosophical layer to this. Ashwarkiya, if you consistently sacrifice your own well-being, what message are you sending to yourself? That your needs don't matter? That everyone else's peace is more sacred than your own? This kind of thinking forms a loop of self-erasure, where your identity becomes tethered to what you provide, rather than who you are. You begin to mistake being depleted for being valuable. But real worth is not measured by exhaustion. Even in service-based roles, caregivers, teachers, parents, leaders, the most impactful people are those who know how to step back, renew, and reconnect to their internal compass. The ones who set boundaries, who pause, who say, "I need a moment," are not weaker. They are wiser. They understand that you cannot transmit what you haven't internalized. You can't offer peace if you're at war within. You can't offer clarity if your mind is clouded. Protecting your energy isn't about turning away from the world. It's about showing up for it with strength that lasts. If your cup is full, what you give overflows naturally. You speak with more patience, love with more presence, and lead with more grace. But when you give from emptiness, everything becomes a transaction, a performance, or an obligation. Look, that's when bitterness creeps in, and the very people you want to serve feel your depletion, not your devotion. The greatest contribution you can make to those around you is not your constant availability, but your sustainable presence. And that presence is only possible when you are nourished, grounded, and filled from within. To choose influence over infection is to take radical ownership of what you allow to shape you. In every environment, we are either affecting it, or absorbing it, or absorbing it. The world is full of voices, projections, insecurities, and anxieties, all eager to crawl into your mind and rewire your reactions. Infection happens passively. You catch it by being unguarded, by not being intentional with your internal state. But influence requires clarity, effort, and discipline. It means standing firm in your values, even when the environment encourages compromise. Infection shows up subtly. It's the bitterness you didn't have until you spent too much time around someone who always complains. It's the anxiety you picked up after soaking in other people's chaos. It's the cynicism that wasn't yours until you internalized someone else's despair. Emotional and mental states are contagious, and if you don't anchor your perspective, you'll begin mirroring people who are disconnected from their own center. Influence, on the other hand, requires that you stay rooted while engaging with the world. Being influential doesn't mean you dominate or preach. It means you embody. You walk into a space, and your presence calms rather than inflames. You listen with discernment, not defensiveness. You respond instead of react. Influence is often quiet and subtle, but it shifts atmospheres. The people around you sense stability instead of volatility. They feel safer, not because you're pretending everything is okay, but because you've cultivated resilience and clarity. Choosing influence over infection means paying attention to who gets access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your consciousness. This isn't arrogance, it's stewardship. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your attention or emotional bandwidth. When you're not discerning, you allow other people's unresolved pain to become your narrative. Influence requires that you guard your gates while remaining open-hearted. You must also be conscious of the media you consume, the stories you rehearse in your head, and the environments you normalize. A toxic narrative repeated enough times becomes a belief system, and belief systems shape behavior. To influence your own life, you must curate what feeds your thoughts. Infection thrives in unfiltered intake. Influence thrives in intentional consumption. It's about choosing nourishment over noise. This idea also applies to your self-talk. Infection isn't just external, it's internal. The words you speak over yourself can either rot your potential or renew your strength. You must be vigilant about your inner dialogue. When your internal voice becomes an ally rather than an enemy, you begin to self-influence in a way that inoculates you against external toxicity. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain. It means you won't drown in it. Influence over infection requires a long view of your own life. It demands that you not only ask what feels good now, but also what leads to growth later. Emotional infection often caters to immediacy. Venting, lashing out, impulsive behavior. Influence chooses restraint, wisdom, and timing. It asks you to act from your principles, not your wounds. It calls you to become someone others can rely on, not someone who merely reflects the chaos around them. Ultimately, influence is about creating a ripple effect that begins with your own self-governance. It's refusing to be a sponge for other people's unresolved chaos and instead becoming a catalyst for clarity. When you choose influence over infection, you no longer walk into rooms looking to be consumed. You walk in ready to transform the atmosphere. By the solidity of your presence, time, and attention are not just resources. They are the currencies of life itself. Every second that passes is a second you will never get back. And where you place your attention is where your energy follows. Unlike money, which can be earned, saved, and invested with returns, time moves forward regardless of your will. Once spent, it is gone. And attention, though seemingly abundant, is just as limited. In a world saturated with noise and distraction, your ability to focus on what truly matters defines the quality of your life. The tragedy is that many people realize this too late. They scatter their attention across endless trivialities, arguments that don't matter, people who drain them, news cycles that never end, while their purpose, relationships, and inner peace deteriorate. Time doesn't ask for your permission before moving forward, and attention doesn't wait for your awareness to be sharpened. These two forces, if not guarded, will be hijacked by others who have clearer agendas than you do for your own life. Social media, for example, is not just a tool, it's an attention economy. Platforms are built to harvest your focus, feeding you just enough dopamine to keep you from noticing how much time you're surrendering. Attention that could be directed toward building something meaningful, your health, your mind, your relationships, is instead siphoned off into endless scrolling. Every swipe is a transaction, and the cost is often your unrealized potential. This doesn't mean withdrawal from the world. It means discernment within it. You must learn to filter ruthlessly. If something doesn't align with your deepest values or highest goals, it's a distraction. And distractions aren't neutral. They're costly. You're not just wasting time. You're building the habit of fragmentation. You train your brain to leap from thought to thought rather than settle into depth. Eventually, this shallowness becomes a way of being, where even your relationships and work suffer from lack of presence. Attention shapes identity. What you consistently focus on becomes your mindset, your habits, and your beliefs. If your attention is fragmented, your identity is fragmented. But when your attention is unified, when it's pointed like a laser toward growth, connection, and truth, you begin to reclaim a sense of inner order. And with order comes strength. You can't control the length of your life, but you can control the direction of your focus within it. Time, too, demands prioritization. You only get 24 hours in a day, and how you use them either compounds your power or erodes it. Every hour you spend ruminating, complaining, procrastinating, or engaging in low-value conversations is an hour stolen from your future self. Discipline with time isn't about becoming robotic. It's about creating space for what actually nourishes you. It's how you honor your existence in the face of mortality. We often speak of giving a time to others, but rarely acknowledge the depth of what that means. When you give someone your time, you are giving them a portion of your life you will never retrieve. That's sacred. Be mindful of who and what receives that gift. If someone wouldn't value an hour of your life, they don't deserve your constant availability. Likewise, If a task doesn't support your vision, it doesn't warrant your sustained energy. Ultimately, the ability to protect your time and attention is the foundation of personal sovereignty. It's how you create a life marked by intention instead of reaction, instead of distraction, by depth instead of distraction. You don't need more hours in the day. You need fewer leaks in your focus. Because how you manage these two finite resources determines not just what you achieve, but who you become. Surrounding yourself with builders, not drainers, is not merely a strategy for success. It's a necessity for survival in a world that constantly tests your emotional and psychological limits. Builders are those who contribute, support, and challenge you to evolve. They don't just cheer you on when you win. They walk with you when you're broken, offering structure rather than just sympathy. Drainers, on the other hand, operate from lack. They siphon your energy through complaint, manipulation, or emotional chaos, often disguised as need or friendship. Builders speak life into your potential. Their presence alone can shift your mindset from limitation to possibility. They ask better questions. They don't always agree with you, but their disagreement is honest, constructive, and rooted in care. With builders, your energy compounds. With drainers, your energy evaporates. The difference is not subtle, it's foundational. It can determine whether you grow with clarity or live entangled in confusion. There's a psychological cost to being surrounded by people who are emotionally chaotic, entitled, or constantly negative. That cost often manifests physically. Fatigue, tension, even illness. You absorb what surrounds you. Drainers are emotional creditors, taking withdrawals from your peace without ever making deposits. Builders, in contrast, operate from stability. They help you regulate your own emotional state because their presence embodies calm and order. The choice of who you surround yourself with is a direct reflection of your self-respect. If you continue to make space for those who belittle, distract, or guilt-trip you into submission, you're signaling to yourself that your time and energy are not worth protecting. But when you start gravitating toward builders, people of integrity, clarity, and purpose, you start elevating your own standards. You begin to see the difference between being liked and being valued. Drainers often come with emotional contracts. I'll be in your life, but you owe me your attention, your energy, your pity. Builders require no such deal. Their support is not transactional. They understand that true connection is not measured by frequency, but by depth and authenticity. Builders make you want to rise. Drainers make you feel heavy and small. Pay attention to how you feel after each interaction. That's the metric. Being around builders doesn't mean constant positivity or empty affirmation. And it means being in a space where accountability, growth, and mutual respect are non-negotiable. Builders will confront you when you're slipping, not to shame you, but to realign you with your highest self. Their feedback is medicine, not poison. They don't need to dim your light to feel bright. Their power doesn't compete with yours, it completes it. And sometimes, choosing builders means enduring seasons of solitude. Because once you become clear on who deserves access to your energy, you may find the room emptier than expected. But that clarity is worth the discomfort. Silence with integrity is far more nourishing than noise born of emotional debt. In solitude, you recalibrate. You learn to recognize the sound of your own needs and the whisper of your intuition, which are often drowned out by the noise of drainers. Ultimately, your environment becomes your ecosystem. If it's filled with people who feed your doubt, numb your clarity, or celebrate your stagnation, you're not in an environment. You're in an emotional trap. But if you intentionally surround yourself with those who build, inspire, and challenge, you're constructing a habitat for strength. You're building the scaffolding for a life that is stable, purposeful, and expansive.